אותנו לשם. כל הדרכים, השבילים, הכבישים, השלטים מובילים לירושלים. כל התפילות, הדמעות, בקשות, מחשבות מובילות לירושלים. כל השירים, פיוטים, מזמורים, סיפורים, כולם לירושלים, ירושלים שבלב. כל הארץ, דלתות העמים, היא אורו של עולם. על שבעת תארים היא עומדת ונמצאת בחלומות של כולם. מקצוות התבל הם נושאים עיניהם, המסע לא הושלם, כי בסוף זה הלב, רק הלב שמוביל, מוביל את כולנו לשם. כל הדרכים, השבילים, הכבישים, השלטים מובילים כל התפילות, הדמעות, בקשות, מחשבות מובילות לירושלים. כל השירים, פיוטים, מזמורים, סיפורים, כולם לירושלים, ירושלים שבלב.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the shir this evening, which is called the Kabbalah of the Barren Soul. In truth, the shir this evening is based on a pasuk in Parshas Mishpatim, this week's parsha. So I'm going to start by reading out the pasukim around which the shir is based. In Shishi of this week's parsha, Hashem says to the Jewish people, Hinei anochi shaleach malach lefonecha, I'm going to send an angel before you, lishmorcha baderech, to guard you on the way, v'lahaviacha el hamokem asher achinoisi, and to bring you to the place which I have prepared. And there it says, va'avadatem es Hashem Elokeichem, there you should serve the Lord your God, uveirach es lachmecha v'es meimecha, and he will bless your food and drink there, v'hasiroisi machala mikirbecha, and I will banish illness from among you. And then in Shvi'i, this is chapter 23, verse 26, it says, Loisia meshakela va'akara ba'aretzecha. If you obey my will, there will not be a woman who miscarries, or a barren woman in your land. Es mispar yomecha amale. I will cause the days of your life to be full. There is a very beautiful maimah of the Alter Rebbe in Torah in this week's parsha, called loisia meshakela ba'aretzecha. And in addition, there is a very avoidedika maimah. That means a discourse from our Rebbe, which was said, Shabbos Parshas Mishpatim, Shabbos Mevorchim Chodesh Adar, in Tovshin Yud Beis in 1952. And tonight's Shir is going to be based on the Alter Rebbe's maimah, but primarily taking out the avodah from the Rebbe's maimah of 1952, Loisia Meshakela. What does it mean, an avoidedika maimah? Many discourses in Chassidus focus on haskalah, on the intellectual understanding of the concepts, be it something in the higher worlds or be it something in reference to the Torah. However, primarily the focus of Chassidus is not the haskalah, is not the intellect which is within the concept, but it's how that affects the person, how there is avodah, how that leads a person to avodas Hashem. And certain landmark ma'amorim are in fact clearly in that line that they focus on the avodah, and this is one of them. Loisia Meshakela Tovshin Yud Beis 1952 was a maimah which stands out as being very focused on our avodas Hashem, and be'ezras Hashem, with the help of Hashem this evening, we will try and roll it out for you. So let's start with the pasuk, Loisia Meshakela va'akora ba'aretzecha. There won't be a woman who miscarries or a barren woman in your land. Now, of course, that is a literal blessing, but everything in the Torah also can be translated in its spiritual dimension. And when we say Loisia Meshakela va'akora ba'aretzecha, it actually has two implications and two meanings. Loisia can mean it's a command, there should not be, but it can also be a promise, there will not be. And both of them together, when we fuse both those translations together, what it means is if you will do what you're supposed to be doing, then there will be no miscarrying or barrenness in your land. And if you have a look in the verse, it actually addresses three key areas: Bonei, Chaye, Umazone. Bonei, children, saying that there will be no infertility or miscarrying. Mazone, food, as it says, Uvereches lachmecha v'esmeimech, Hashem will bless your food and drink. And chaye, and health. It says v'hasirosi machla mikirbecha, that I will take away any sickness from among you. So in other words, Hashem is promising us that if we do our avodah properly, then we will have a blessing in bonei, in children, in chaye, in health, and in mezoneh, and in livelihood and in sustenance. How do we achieve that? Says the pasuk, "Va'avadtem es Hashem Elokeichem." You should serve the Lord your God. What type of avodah is this? When it says, "V'hasirosi machla mikirbecha," I will take away the sickness from among you. What type of sickness is that referring to? And as we said previously, what is the concept of meshakela, of miscarrying, and akora, infertility, in our avodas Hashem, in our service of Hashem? And hence you can now already start deciphering the title of this evening's class, the Kabbalah of the Barren Soul. Reishis ha'avoda ve'ikra v'sharsha, says the Alter Rebbe in Tanya, chapter 41, which, by the way, the beginning of chapter 41 in Tanya is such a key passage that the Rebbe instructed many people to learn it verbatim and to repeat it wherever they were, especially when walking in the street, and said that this is a segula, this is auspicious to ward off any extraneous thought, any invading thoughts, and it's mechazek, it strengthens a person's yirah shamayim, fear of heaven. So there, in the beginning of chapter 41 in Tanya, the Alter Rebbe says that reishis ha'avoda, the very beginning of avoda, ikra v'sharsha, its principle, its root, is Kabbalah's oil, the acceptance of the yoke of heaven, yiras Hashem, the fear of heaven. In other words, there, the eved, the servant who serves the master, is and has no relevance and being for themselves. The servant is nullified to the master. And even though the servant has not changed themselves in any way, but nevertheless, when it comes to the actual deed, they do everything they're supposed to do. And the reason why Kabbalah's oil, the acceptance of the yoke of heaven, and serving Hashem with Yirah Shamayim, with the awe of heaven, the fear of heaven, is the beginning of Avodah, is because one simply cannot wait until one has transformed oneself when it comes to doing the mitzvahs. When a person becomes obligated to keep the mitzvahs at the age of bar and bas mitzvah, at that moment they're obligated to keep the mitzvahs in thought, speech, and deed. And even though they haven't worked on themselves or necessarily transformed themselves, nevertheless, the beginning of Avodah has to be Yirah Shamayim, has to be the fear of heaven, and Kabbalah's oil. And as the Alter Rebbe writes there in Tanya, V'hinei Hashem nitzav alav, a person should contemplate that Hashem is standing by them, uboichin kloyes v'leiv, and is examining their heart, and inwards im oivdoi koroi, to see if they're serving Hashem properly. So that's the beginning of Avodah. And the truth is, that's the Seder HaAvodah, that's the order in one's service Hashem on a daily basis. First thing we do when we wake up in the morning is we say, Moedeh ani lefanecha. There's the admission and the submission. Similarly, when we start davening, even before we've got into any meditation during the Pesukei de Zimmer, the verses of praise and the blessings of Shema and the Shema itself, we start off with Hoidu Lashem, by a thanks to Hashem, a submission to Hashem. That's the beginning of all Avodah. Nevertheless, when we say Va'avadatem es Hashem Elokeichem, you should serve the Lord your God, that Avodah primarily refers to the Avodah of davening, of tefillah. Like the Rambam says, that davening is a mitzvah because it says, Va'avadatem es Hashem Elokeichem, Ezoi hi avodah shebelev, what is considered avodah of the heart, zu tefillah. When we talk about avodah, that means tefillah, that means davening. And when we daven, davening has two goals. One goal of davening is the connection of the nefesh alikis with God, the chibur, the hiskashrus of the godly soul with Hashem, so the neshama yearns for and connects with its source. And the second goal in davening is the birur v'zichuch haguf v'nefesh habahamis, the refining of the body and the animal soul. And those two must actually go hand in davening, as is explained in Kuntras HaAvodah. Now, when we start off with the Avodah of Yirah, not necessarily does a person change themselves, or is there a necessity for a person to change themselves. It could be that you have a person who naturally fears Hashem. They have this innate yiras Hashem, and they keep mitzvahs b'poil, in actuality, properly. But it could be by that person, their nefesh habahamis, their animal soul, is still as strong as it ever was. And in fact, it gets stronger, as the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, with more usage as the person gets older. And since the nefesh habahamis has not been refined, and here is a fascinating point, the connection of the godly soul of the nefesh elikis is not complete. Because since the descent of the godly soul was not in order to rectify the soul, in fact, Alter Rebbe says in Tanya that the point of the Yerida of the descent of the godly soul was not for the soul itself, but rather it is for the nefesh habahamis to refine the animal soul. Therefore, if the godly soul has not fulfilled its function in its descent to refine the animal soul, it itself is lacking in its connection with Hashem. Because full connection of the godly soul with Hashem is when it fulfills its mission. And its mission is to refine and elevate the animal soul. This concept of refining the animal soul lies etymologically in the word avodah itself. Avodah means service, but its root is the word ibud oiros, the tanning of skins. Skins, when they come off the animal, until they are produced into parchment for a Sefer Torah, tefillin, and mezuzah, have a huge process. They go through salting and stretching, and there's a whole process in the ibud, in the working on the skins in order to transform them from coarse hide into supple parchment. And similarly, in a person's avodah, in the inner avodas hatefillah, the avodah of davening, that primarily is achieved through ahavas Hashem, the love of Hashem. When the godly soul communicates with the animal soul and it takes it on board, ve'ohavto es Hashem Elokecha, you should love Hashem b'chol levavecha, with your entire heart, says the Gemara, b'shnei yitzarecha, with both the Yetzer Tov and the Yetzer Hara. And in order that the Yetzer Hara should also love Hashem, it requires tremendous communication from the Yetzer Tov, from the godly soul, to the animal soul, in a language which the animal soul understands, because if the godly soul is speaking esoteric language, the animal soul does not understand it. But davening is about having that inner conversation, that reflective moment where the godly soul rides in tandem, embraces the animal soul, and takes it along together with its love of Hashem. B'chol levavecha, uv'chol nafshecha, with the entire nefesh, uv'chol mo'idecha, and ultimately to the point of mesiras nefesh. Now, that's true avodah. When you have yira to begin with, developing into a very passionate and fiery ahava, love for Hashem during davening. Says the Torah, after it says, Va'avadatem es Hashem Elokeichem, that you should serve Hashem, as we've just described, Loisia meshakela va'akara, that there should not be a miscarriage or infertility in this avodah, which means the following. Akara means that it can't bear children. The children which we're referring to here are the children of Ahava and Yira, love of Hashem and the awe of Hashem, because those are the children of hisbonenus, of meditation. Because when it says in the Torah, ve'ohavta, how is it possible to command an emotion? You can't tell a person that they have to love. So the command is not to switch on an emotion, but rather it is to meditate. And when a person meditates, that will arouse commensurately with the meditation an emotion. And ahava is correlated with a son, as it says in the pasuk, Zochar chastoi, and Zochar can also be read Zochar, male. Chesed, love, is connected with the ben, the son, and Yira, fear, is connected with a bas, with a daughter. As the Gemara says, bas siman labonim. If a person has a daughter first, that's a sign that thereafter they will have sons. Because first is Yira, which is the bas, the daughter, and then you have the ahava. That's the seder and avodah. You start with Yira, as we said before, Reishis or Avodah, which is the beginning of Avodah, and then you progress to Ahava. First, there is the Bas Siman Labanim. Now, Akara means a barren soul is a soul that doesn't bear any children. It doesn't bear any ahava v'yira, any love or fear for Hashem. It doesn't feel. Meshakela, a miscarriage, means it could be that it does bear, but it doesn't last. It dissipates. It's not true. It doesn't last. And therefore, loisia meshakela v'akara b'aretzecha can be translated in its inner spiritual avodah dimension, that in your service of Hashem, you shouldn't be in a place where you're not bearing any love or fear for Hashem. And even if you do bear them, don't miscarry it, don't lose it, don't let it dissipate. And as we said beforehand, there are two translations of the pasuk. One is a command and one is a promise, which means if you will do everything as it should be done, then you won't be infertile and you won't miscarry. Let's have a look more closely at what does an akara mean. What is this spiritual infertility, the barren soul? It says about Sarah Imenu that she was barren. Says the Gemara, she didn't even have a womb. She didn't have a base vlad. She didn't even have a receptacle from which to become pregnant. Now, in the spiritual dimension, when we say that a person is barren, they don't even have a receptacle. What this means is that they don't have what we call a hispalos sichlis. They don't get excited intellectually, which could create midos, emotions, feelings. Because if a person is not intellectually stimulated, then they're not going to be emotionally attracted. In other words, not only does such a person have what we call a timtum halev, a blocked, stopped up heart, but in additional, they have a timtum hamoyach. Their brain is stopped up. The brain is clogged. It is full, and it's not a receptacle. There's no hispalus haseichel. There's no excitement in the mind. What is the reason for that? The reason is because something can only be a receptacle if it has a place to receive. And if it's full, a full cup is not going to receive anything else. So if one's mind is full of retzonos shaloi, of one's own desires, then it's not going to accept an excitement about Hashem. Now that, of course, has various levels. It starts off in the prohibited. Some people's minds are full of desires for that which is prohibited. Then it graduates to the permitted. Some people's minds are full of desires for that which is permitted, which, as the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, is a shade mishadin Yehudoim. However, you can graduate even further. Some people's minds are full of desires of the godly soul. In other words, they say, oh, yes, this avodah I want. This avodah, that's not for me. This I want, but this I don't want. When a person is in such a mode, that means that they are deciding what is best for them, their own rotzon, their own desire, and their keli, their receptacle, is full. It's not going to receive anything more than what they desire. It says about a kois shel bracha, a cup of blessing, over which we recite the birchas hamazon, the grace after meals at the end of the meal. It says it needs hadacha mibifnim. Before one benches with such a cup, it needs washing out. A cup needs to be clean, empty, clean. It can't be spoiled. One's not going to pour wine into a dirty cup. One can't fill a cup that's full. And similarly, if a person has no hispailos haseichel, if a person's mind is not excited about the gadlus Hashem, the greatness of Hashem, about learning and davening, it's because their mind is full of other things. And therefore, they're an akora, they're infertile. There's no place to receive the child. It's a barren soul. And then you have a second level of where there is a womb, but it doesn't give birth. And the reason is because there's a timtum alev, there's a blockage in the heart. The emotions are stopped up. A person is desensitized, just doesn't feel anything, even though they may get intellectually excited, but there's a blockage there in the heart. And then there's the meshakela. The meshakela means that there's the excitement of the mind, and it excites the heart, but then it miscarries. It dissipates. It doesn't last. Why? The Alter Rebbe in Torah Or gives a fascinating explanation for this. He says a person needs to know, and needs to know fully, that any love and fear that a person has in their heart is actually a gift from God. He compares it to a person's earnings. It says, God will bless you in everything that you do. You can't rely on miracles for income. You need to make a keli. You need to make a receptacle, a vessel for that income. On the other hand, you need to know that the blessing is from Hashem. Birchas Hashem hitashir. It's the blessing of God that makes a person wealthy. All a person has to do is to make a kosher vessel. The actual blessing of wealth, that comes from Hashem. Says the Alter Rebbe that just like it is in the physical and the material, similarly in the spiritual, a person needs to make a vessel, a kosher vessel. A person needs, just like in agriculture, to plow and to plant and to irrigate. And then It's the blessing of Hashem that makes the crops grow, the power of the koyach hatzemech, the vegetative power in the ground that Hashem put there will make it grow. Says the Alter Rebbe, just like you have the Eretz HaTachtoina, the terrestrial earth, you have Eretz Elyona, you have supernal earth. Oir Zarua Latzadik, the light which is planted for the tzaddik, says the Alter Rebbe, a tzaddik has to plant, but the light is a gift from above. A person shouldn't say and yearn, I love, and I want to do this, and the love which I have is generated by me, and I thought and I did. When that happens, dimyoines shav, a person becomes full of fantasies. What a person needs to know is that they need to make that receptacle, and the feelings which they are granted is a gift from above. Such a gift will remain, because then a person realizes that even their love and fear of Hashem is not generated by themselves, but it is, in fact, a gift from above. Self-generated can dissipate, that can miscarry. A gift from God remains. And even if a person's avodah is as it should be, both in mind and in heart, and they're not fantasizing, there is real love and fear there, and there is va'avadatem es Hashem Elokeichem, to the extent as Chassidus explains that Hashem, Havaya, Hoya, Hova, V'yia, God who is transcendent, becomes Elokeichem, becomes your chayas, and your koyach becomes internalized. Nevertheless, there still needs to be a zihirus. A person needs to be very careful in their avodah that there should not be a meshakela, a miscarriage, that they shouldn't lose what they have. And they can easily lose what they have if they have a sevias haratzain, a satisfaction with their avodah, to pat themselves and be happy with what they have achieved. Because loisia meshakela be'artzecha, you should not have a miscarriage in your eretz. Eretz is from the word rotzoin, in your will and your desire. In other words, don't let your will and desires become the be-all and the end-all, and that if you have achieved, you feel very satisfied and you're happy with your level, because such spiritual satisfaction can lead to downfall, can lead to the miscarriage. How does one deal with that? How does one deal with a false sense of spiritual satisfaction? Carries on the pasuk and says, "Es mispar yomecha amali," I will fill the days, the number of days of your life. This is through a person contemplating about the length of their own life. Nobody knows how long they're going to live. Ein adam yodea itoyu zmanoi. Nobody knows for how long they will live, their days and their years. And in fact, a person is given the amount of years, months, weeks, days, hours, minutes, which they actually need for their avodas Hashem, for their shlichus, for their mission, their soul mission down here on earth. And one needs to be bar bayomim. One needs to come with all one's days. It says, V'Avram, V'Sara, Zakenim bar bayomim. They were elderly, but coming with their days. Explains the Zohar that they came with all their days. Every single day was full. In fact, one of the meanings when we say a person should have arichus yomim, they should have longevity, it means they should live a long time, but it also means that every day should be long. Every day should be completely filled with their Avodas Hashem, every hour, every minute, every moment focused on their God. The great leader of the Jewish people in the times of the destruction of the Second Temple, it says about Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, just before he passed away, he said, Eini yodea be'eze derech molichin osi. I don't know which way they're going to take me. In other words, are they going to take him to heaven or, God forbid, to the other place? And of course, the question is asked, how's that possible? How is it possible that a man like Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, who was full of Torah and Avodah and Yiras Hashem, a person who taught thousands of people Torah, how is it possible to say of such a person, how could he say of himself that he didn't know which way he was going? There are many explanations. However, one of the explanations is that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was so immersed in his shlichus, in his mission, he didn't have time to think about his level. He was so busy doing what he needed to be doing, taking care of who he needed to take care of. He didn't have time to think about his own level, where is he up to? And only at the end of his life, he stopped. He realized this was the full stop at the end of the sentence. And then he said, I'm really not sure, because it could be outwardly it's like this, but what's doing in my inner core? And I'm not sure where they're going to take me. In fact, when a person contemplates not just a wasted day, hour, minute, second, when a person contemplates that they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing, this actually is tantamount to a merida b'malchus, a rebellion against the king. Because if the king gave you a place to guard and you're messing around and you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing, that's a rebellion against the king himself. And so consequently, if a person's asked, which level are you on? Where are you up to? The person says, I don't have time to think about that. I'm so busy doing this mitzvah and doing that mitzvah and learning this and teaching that and so on and so forth. As mispar yomecha, that number of days, if a person thinks that way about utilizing every single day and questioning themselves, have they actually used their time in this world properly? That will for sure lead them that they won't have any self-spiritual satisfaction. It will lead a person to a bitter realization that there was a lot of wasted time and resource. And so, when a person serves Hashem with loisia meshakela va'akora baratzecha, not having a barren soul, not having a soul that miscarries and no continuity of their avas Hashem and yiras Hashem, or baratzecha, not having a spiritual being spiritual satiated, then Hashem says to them, if you serve me properly, as mispar yomecha amale, I will fill the days of your life, which means that even if you have missed the day, hour, month, year, years, amale, I can fill it up, says Hashem. And it's filled up in the way of mispar. Says the Alter Rebbe, mispar comes from the word sapphire, which means a sapphire stone, luminant, brilliant. If you serve me properly, then you can go back and do great reclamation in a way that lost time will now shine because it's been transformed in the present. And I will take away all sickness from you. What sickness are we talking about? We're talking here about the root of all sickness. The root of all sickness is hargoshas atzmai, is egocentricity, feelings of oneself. In fact, in the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve were naked, but were not ashamed, because before the sin of the tree of knowledge, they just saw themselves as conduits for the divine will. There was nothing in it for themselves. They were in sync with what Hashem wanted. When they ingested and digested that fruit, that was the moment that some selfish feeling came into being. Vatera ha'isha, the woman saw, ki toiv ha'etz lamachol, that the fruit was good to eat, even if it wasn't the will of Hashem. Something else, some other feeling had been created, that feeling of self, which is other than the will of Hashem. Hashem says, serve me properly, and I'll take that feeling away. So when you serve Hashem with loisia akara, loisia meshakela v'akara, that there's no barrenness, because your mind, you've created space in it. You've washed it out so that you can have hispalas haseichel. You can get intellectually stimulated by what you're learning. And that can give birth to feelings of love and awe. And those are not meshakela, miscarried by fantasy, but they are real feelings, because they're not rooted in a person's self-feeling that I've generated this, but there's full recognition that this is a gift from God. And it's ba'aretzecha. There's no feelings that a person of personal satisfaction that I've reached a certain level. That's not good, because when a person has that feeling, they're not steiging, they're not growing in their service of Hashem. There always has to be this healthy lack of satisfaction. That doesn't mean to say that a person is not going anywhere ever, and that can lead, God forbid, to a depression. It means a healthy feeling that if good is good, better can be better. And whatever level I've achieved now, I need to grow from here. Then, as mispar yomecha amale, when a person thinks to themselves that have I utilized every day, every hour, every minute, every second, and when a person comes to the sober realization that things were missing, but nevertheless, it's possible, if we serve Hashem now properly, to reclaim those times and moments, and in a way that it's sapphire luminant, mispar from the word sapir, then one can fill in any chisaron, anything which is lacking. The bottom line of this beautiful presentation is that, of course, there are times for introspection, cheshbon hanefesh, soul accounting. But in general, a person should be so involved with the fulfillment of their mission here on earth, utilizing every single minute and taking themselves out of the equation and just focusing on the shlichus, on what their mission is, what they actually needed to be doing, acutely aware that there's a certain time frame in which it must be done, acutely aware that each day is a gift, each hour is a gift, each moment is a gift, and acutely aware that what they need to do is create their vessel, and Hashem will give them, if they merit, that gift of closeness and of proximity. When a person goes with such an approach, then a person will enter the land with bonei, chaye, umazone, with children, physical, spiritual, good health, a healthy spiritual level, and with sustenance, with livelihood, both begashmias in the material and beruchnias, a lively and healthy spiritual life in which every day and moment is filled and permeated with focus, meaning, and shlichus, fulfillment of mission. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi Dubov. We truly appreciate it. And thank you to everyone that joined. Have a great week.